the US State Department has ordered all non-emergency government employees to leave Iraq immediately. This comes amid rising tensions in the region. Last week, the US deployed warships to the Gulf in a move it said was a response to indications of threats from Iran. Well, let's cross now live to Rob Matheson, who joins us from Baghdad. Rob, we're hearing that the US withdrawing all non-emergency personnel. Why would this be?
Well, they certainly seem to be perceiving that there is an increasing threat against US military personnel, but also, as you were mentioning, what they call non-emergency personnel. That's basically every other US citizen that's currently working in and around Iraq. They believe, or they're alleging, from Shia armed groups here in Iraq, many of which have links to Iran. When we're talking about non-emergency staff, we're not talking about the 5,200 US military troops which are currently in Iraq, who are training the Iraqi military and countering the threats from ISIL. That is their remit. We're talking about contractors, we're talking about oil workers, we're talking about government employees, for example, working in the embassies. The State Department has put out a part of that statement saying that the embassy services in Iraq are likely to be closed temporarily. The inference being reopened at some point in the future, but non-essential, non-emergency staff and citizens being asked to leave Iraq by commercial means at the moment.
Meanwhile, Rob, there have been conflicting messages from within the anti-ISIL coalition about the general threat level posed by Iran.
That's right. It's been quite an interesting past 24 hours. Just a few hours ago, the US Central Command, which oversees operations in the Middle East and Afghanistan, put out a statement countering earlier comments by one of its deputy commanders, Major General Christopher Ghika, who had suggested that the perceived threat level from those Shia armed groups in Iraq to US forces and other foreign forces wasn't as serious as perhaps had been made out. Here's what he had to say.
No, there's been no increased threat from Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria. We're aware of their presence, clearly, and we monitor them along with a whole range of others, because that's the environment we're in.
Now, the very interesting thing about this is that, as I say, just a few hours after that, US Central Command put out a statement saying that, to all intents and purposes, it got it wrong, that in fact there was a significant increase in the threat level from Shia armed groups here in Iraq, as I say, many of which are linked to Iran. There is a suggestion that it may in some way relate to the movement of military vehicles and military assets by these forces, which form part of the popular mobilization forces here in Iraq. They're essentially almost a kind of parallel military that exists in Iraq alongside the Iraqi army itself. Should be pointed out that both those forces, the PMF and the Iraqi military, come under the auspices of the Prime Minister. And you may remember that this US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was here not long ago, who spoke to the Prime Minister and sought assurances from the Prime Minister that US personnel would not be under threat by Iraqi forces or any forces within Iraq. And the Prime Minister said at the time he was willing to give those assurances.
Rob Matheson, we'll be checking in with you throughout the day, but for now, thank you very much for bringing us that update from Baghdad.